House Republicans narrowly voted to approve the annual defense authorization bill, largely along party lines. That was earlier today. Joining us now to discuss is Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan, Democrat of Virginia, and she sits on the House Armed Services Committee. So you're intimately aware of the details of this bill. Is this going to be a difficult one, the fact that you voted against this, to go back to your district and constituents and to explain why?
It will not be difficult. I mean, this bill was loaded down with poison pills that my district would not support. Everything from limiting access to our service members' reproductive health to eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion provisions or programs in the military. I mean, so many divisive culture wars that my district and Virginians, frankly, have rejected time and time again.
4 Democrats voted for this bill, as I'm sure you know, Congresswoman. What would be your message to them? The narrative in Washington is they couldn't go back home as frontliners and tell their constituents they voted against military funding because they'd get killed in the primary. There'd be ads running against them. What would you tell them tonight?
I mean, look, I am not going to presume to tell someone how to vote. I will say that this bill does not help our service members to do their jobs. It puts too many barriers in their way. It will make it much harder to recruit a diverse armed services that reflects the full diversity of the country that they are protecting. It limits already limited access to health care for them, and the quality of life issues that our service members are facing. You know, we owe them more than what this bill gives them when they are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to keep us safe. We need to give them not only what they need to do their job, but what they need to have a good quality of life and a welcoming workplace environment.
In the past, we used to see sometimes progressives and conservatives vote against the NDAA because they don't want to spend as much on defense spending. Actually, the amendments regarding defense spending, like more aid to Ukraine, or actually, I'm sorry, less aid to Ukraine, those were struck down. So it really doesn't seem like the defense spending is the issue anymore amongst Republicans and Democrats. It's more about the culture wars. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. As you remember, the bill came out of committee with the strong bipartisan support on a 58-to-1 vote because it balanced giving our military what they need to do their job, also making sure that we gave our service members and their families what they needed for a good quality of life. That bill I proudly supported. I think would have overwhelmingly passed the House. But Speaker McCarthy caved to the MAGA elements of his caucus, who demanded these extreme amendments that do not do our service members any good and actually will harm our recruitment efforts and make it more difficult to have a strong, diverse armed forces.
Well, so walk us down the path here, Congresswoman. As a member of the Armed Services Committee, you have a unique perspective here. Everyone says it doesn't stand a chance in the Senate. Could this drag things out to the point where Pentagon spending is at risk?
Worst case scenario, we could probably do some sort of short gap measure. I do think we will ultimately come back from the brink. I am an eternal optimist, so I am hopeful we will get a compromise bill at the end that is closer to what came out of the Armed Services Committee markup. So that's what I am hoping for. That's what I'm advocating for, but stay tuned.
Does it ultimately go to a conference, or is it just going to be potentially too far to the brink that a conference isn't even doable?
I think time will tell. It's too soon to tell that, depending on how long it takes for the Senate to act and how long, whether the Chaos Caucus continues to try to hold legislation hostage to their extreme agenda or not. The ball is really in their court, whether the House Republicans are going to be reasonable and try to actually give the military what they need to do their job, or whether they're going to hold yet another bill hostage to their extreme agenda.
Congresswoman, Bloomberg is reporting on an important development here on the relocation of the FBI headquarters. Maryland and your state of Virginia are in competition right now, and we understand at one point this might even come down to a basketball game between your two governors, but it does appear that Wes Moore is doing something right. Bloomberg is reporting that Maryland is gaining on Virginia in the race for the headquarters, likely having to do with social equity more than proximity to Quantico. What are you hearing on the Armed Services Committee? Is this real?
Well, this is the first I've heard of that. I think we have seen studies that show, or reports that show, that Virginia would make more sense. But our governor has leaned into the MAGA culture wars agenda. And I think if he can pull back from the brink and focus on what is best for Virginia, what is best for our service members, and actually trying to do the job he was elected to do rather than audition for the next one that he wants, then we should be successful. It makes much more sense for the FBI to be in Virginia.
So do you think Governor Youngkin did not do a good enough job selling Virginia?
I'm not going to speak to what he did or did not do. I think that if he focuses on governing in a way that solves problems and helps people in Virginia rather than trying to audition for another job, Virginia has a very strong chance of getting the FBI, and the rest, the congressional delegation, we are doing our part to make sure that happens.
Well, yeah, it's not a done deal yet, certainly, Congresswoman. What can Virginia do? What would you like to see the governor do in the meantime if it's required to turn things around?
I would like to see the governor focus on governing, solving problems, helping people in Virginia, maybe get a state budget. I would like to see him focus on that, focus on the job he was elected to do rather than trying to audition for the next one he wants.
When you say the next one he wants, I guess what you mean in a wink, wink, nod, nod is that you think he wants to be president of the United States. So far, though, he hasn't thrown his hat in the ring. Just quickly, back to the criteria Joe mentioned. This is according to our Eric Wasson, our congressional reporter. The new criteria for the decision revealed to Congress would give greater weight to cost and advancing social equity than proximity. Is there something about advancing social equity that your delegation from Virginia could now go and pitch potentially further?
Look, Virginia did a very good job in the 2020 and 2021 sessions of addressing inequity that is in every system, whether it's education, access to health care, workforce development. We did a great job of beginning to address the over 300 years of inequity that is still a legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. That job's not finished. There's more we can do. And so I think first highlighting what we have already done and continuing down that path will help.
Well, let's stay in touch on this, Congresswoman. In the meantime, we'll keep driving by the FBI headquarters. It's literally falling apart on Pennsylvania Avenue. Our thanks to Virginia Congresswoman Jennifer McClellan. Coming up on Balance of Power, big banks releasing quarterly earnings.